You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers! Welcome to today's episode. We're diving into the captivating world of Andrew Bajda's Captured in Liberation. This spellbinding tale takes us back to World War II, unraveling the long-hidden story of Bajda's father. Set against the tumultuous background of Europe, this book is a powerful testament to the enduring strength and family of the relentless pursuit of freedom. Join us as we explore the incredible survival, resilience, and liberation journey that has touched readers' hearts worldwide. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me as my co-host for On the Air with Florenza. And I did read your bio on the onset, and I want to say the one time that we met was at an event, and instantly I knew that I had to have you on as my co-host. So please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and why your book, Captured in Liberation, is something that you are so passionate about.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. Also, when I met you, I knew that, this would be so much fun. But I actually have spent my whole life in a number of professions. I started off in research, working at AT&T for Ohio Bell. I left there to start my own business. And then I got into teaching. I taught one class part-time at Tri-C, and I loved it so much. I knew this was my passion. So I've been teaching full-time for 15 years, just retired 2 years ago, and I still do a little bit of teaching on and off. Um, but my whole life, I always knew that I wanted to write a book. And I knew what I wanted to write a book about because my father, I grew up with a very quiet man who would give me little tidbits of being in the war. And as a young boy, that's pretty exciting. He gave little, tidbits about being in a prison. We'd watch Hogan's Heroes together, and he'd say, "Yep, that was exactly like the prison that I was in." So he would give these little things, not a lot. He didn't want to talk too much, but it was finally about maybe 8 years ago that what we were at his house with my daughter, and my daughter said something to my mother, "Grandma, have you ever been accused of being a spy?" Because my mother was being silly. And my father very stoically sat there and said, "Well, I was." And I listened to him, and from that point on, I got my notebook, I got out the atlas, and that was the start of what would be about 3 years of learning his story. Everything that happened from when he was a 15-year-old boy when World War II began to how he met my mother at the end of the war. So basically, the story of him during World War II from 1939 to 1945. And the story was just fascinating.
Wow.
So I became an author. On top of my other things, I became an author. And I've since given book talks. I've given book talks in 3 countries, at libraries, universities, and it's just opened a whole bunch of doors. And it just continues with now meeting you. And that's to me part of the excitement, part of the adventure.
Listen, I, as an advocate for our nation's veterans, I would oftentimes, when a veteran would come to me, I would start by saying, "What's your story?" And oftentimes they thought I meant what was the problem or the situation that brought them to my office. And I told them, I said, "No, no, no, no. That's just what set you on a course to come talk to me. What's
Right,
your actual story?" And
right.
to have these brave men and women, no matter what their path was, the fact that we all have a story,
Yeah.
and to create this atmosphere where they were able to share as much or as little of their stories as they were comfortable doing was just such a blessing. And I jumped right in to you talking that I forgot to toast our show. And so here, is to a very successful show, albeit a little late. We're going to toast, and you have a fancy glass,
Yes, I do.
but we have what's in that glass?
Actually, it's water.
It's water. And
I got together with some friends last night, so water's on the menu for today. But the next time when we toast in person, it'll be something a little stronger.
well, you know what? I must have known because I am traveling at the time of this recording and I am in a dry house. So I have half lemonade and half sweet tea, which I
Well, there
rarely
you are.
ever drink. So cheers.
Well, here's our healthy toast.
Hmm. So, what was that first emotion like when you realized when your father was sharing that story that you had stumbled onto
Yeah,
something huge in
yeah.
terms of who your father is, but by default, who you are in terms of being his son?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I've got to tell you, there were a few wow moments. It started off, I just knew it was an amazing story, that was so much there. But I had no thought of publishing a book. It was just to get all the history
Mm-hmm,
down
mm-hmm.
so that we would have it for our family. But as he went on and he was explaining some things, and he did it in a very nonchalant, unassuming manner, I had to say, wait, stop. You
Right,
did what? And there were so many things like that I was just scrambling and writing, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, like some of the things that he explained to me, and that it was real, that it really did happen. Things that you couldn't script, you couldn't write this in a movie. You couldn't be
right,
that
right.
clever to come up with this. Just as an example, he had his best friend was a young Jewish a boy named Ulick. And they were, of course, separated, at the beginning of the war. My father went one way, and Mulek was unfortunately sent to a concentration camp at Auschwitz.
Mm,
So, figured they'd never see each other again. And my father happened to be at a train station in Munich right after the war. And he was just, he was in his uniform, and he was red. He was only there for one day. The city was bombed, the shelter, everything's bombed. But he noticed that there was a train station that was partially open. So something drew him to walk to that train station.
uh-huh.
He walks to the train station, crowded with people, thousands of people. And for whatever reason, he locks on the eyes of what he thought was an old man. That person stared right back at him. It was Mulek, who appeared as an old man who had survived Auschwitz, was on his way to Israel on a train. How he stopped at that train station,
At
why he
that
walked
moment.
at that, everything that just came together with thousands of people, these two lock eyes. And there were just so many moments like that in the book that you just can't. There's another force that made these things happen.
Wow.
Um, that was just one of so many, and his escape attempts, how humorous some of them were, how audacious it was, but how clever it was. And I'd say, "You did what?" And it got to the point that I said, finally, I said, "Not only do I have to publish a book,
We
I
got to
got to
write a
write a
movie.
movie."
Yes.
This is just too much. And when I would give book talks, almost everybody would come up to me after the talk, with millions of questions, and they would all say, you should make this a movie. I mean, it was just there's just so many of those moments. And the funny thing, Florenza, my father, I grew up, he was a very quiet man,
Uh-huh.
very quiet, unassuming. My mother was the boisterous one, she kind of ran the household. My father just kind of sat back,
Uh-huh.
didn't say much. But once we began this journey, he became a whole different person. And
Nice.
to this day, he still will talk freely.
Yeah.
So it's opened up for him, as you may have seen in one of the videos. Even though he just turned 100, typically not the best years of your life, but in some ways, I think these last 10 years have been very special for him, among his best years, because he has traveled with me,
Yeah.
invitation to Poland, to Italy, been a part of, honoring, being honored. So it's just opened up so many doors in that respect that I would have never anticipated.
Of the questions that you asked him, did the topic ever come up of why he remained so silent about that part of his life?
Yeah, and you're going to find this answer funny. So I asked him, and other people asked, why is it that you chose now to talk?
Yeah,
And he said, nobody asked me.
exactly what I was saying earlier. When my veterans would walk in, first thing out of my mouth is, tell me your story,
Yeah.
right? Now, how knowledgeable was your mom of your dad's story?
She was not the depth of everything. My mother, was in herself a very unique and interesting person. So how they met was kind of fun and interesting. But she's not, I don't think she was ever as intrigued by, the World War II journey
Mm, hmm,
as I
hmm.
was. As a young boy, that's something that you probably find a little bit more intriguing. So I don't know that she was as knowledgeable of all the detail. And by the way, her story is also quite interesting. When I write the book, it's kind of written about three people.
Hmm.
Part of it, my mother, because what she was in England during the war, and they went through, the first chapter is my mother when she's orphaned at age 13 in England. And part of it is my uncle, my father's brother, who was sent to Siberia and had an
Yes.
amazing journey of his own. But my father is the main protagonist. So it's
Hmm.
kind of three stories that come together, at the end. But yeah, I don't know that she knew too much about him, but I will tell you this: after I wrote the book, and my mother was not doing well, she passed away several years after the book was published. He read the book to her twice.
Oh,
So she would be laying in her position, and he would read the book to her, maybe three chapters a night,
oh,
and she loved it.
oh,
So she heard the story, which was also her story.
through your words
And
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 his
those are,
voice.
the best critics. If your mother says she liked it, if the mother says she liked it, then it passed the test because there was one uncle, she thought that I made her uncle sound a little bit too cruel, but it's a story. You have to,
Right.
but he wasn't cruel in fact, but that was her only critique. And I used a swear word one time in there that she said you shouldn't have used that, but beyond that, it really warms my heart to know that before my mother passed, my father read the story to her,
Hmm.
and then she asked him to read it a second time. And the thought, and I never saw that, but the thought of them sharing those moments together is very special to me.
That's beautiful. How did hearing his story change your perspective of who you are?
Oh, that's interesting. It certainly changed my perspective of him, but it clearly also made me see myself
Hmm.
differently. I learned so much. I grew so much.
Hmm.
It was probably it took about 3 years to write, including the research and travel, everything that went with it. And those were three of the best years of my life. I was so passionate. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the sleepless nights where I was trying to think, how am I gonna, put this in words? And some of me did come out in the book
Yeah.
because you're writing about somebody, you can't help to put some of your personality in that
Yeah. Yeah.
description. So some of me did come out, and it was, and I just learned so much. I mean, just from a knowledge of understanding now history,
Yeah.
understanding the war, and being able to, I've actually spoke to the World Institute of Politics in Washington D.C. to be able to speak to such an audience, of people from CIA go to school there, and to be able to speak to them and have the confidence to speak about something that is of interest to them. So it really it was a kind of a awakening for me,
Yeah.
to go from somebody who knew nothing of this to being able to speak to groups and really feel, that you're making an impact. It was very, very rewarding in so many ways, very
Wow.
fulfilling. And a big part of the reward was just to see what it meant to him,
Yes.
to see how it helped change his life.
Wow.
and my family members in Poland, who because of this I have grown closer to them. So it really, ties a lot of things together. And now we kind of slowed down with COVID a little bit and
Hmm.
life happening, but now I'm ready to kind of, continue that journey and do some other things with it.
I would just imagine that hearing your father speak, not just as a son, just as his seed, would square your shoulders even further and like tilt your chin even higher,
Yeah.
knowing that this human of such greatness and hilarity, like I love how some of the stories, the weight to the story is told with humor so that it's palatable, so that it's not a hard war
Yeah.
story, it's a
Yeah.
life story.
And that's so true. I tell people, I've read, especially since writing the book, I've read so many books, about World War II, and so many of them are so dark, the concentration camps,
Mm-hmm,
what people
mm-hmm,
went through. War is clearly dark, but it's more of an inspiring story.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It's more of a
mm-hmm.
story that's a feel-good story. There is humor in there. There is passion. There's a lot of emotions felt. And I think that was really important, because when you're telling a story, you don't want it to just be
Right,
dragging you down.
right.
It's a lot of those stories need to be told, but I like a story that leaves you inspired, that
Yes.
leaves a message, that takes you someplace that you can feel good about and try to make a difference.
Was there a time during your travels that you had such an aha moment
Mm.
that it confirmed that what you were doing, you were destined to do?
Yeah, there were several moments where I would go someplace and you could almost feel that deja vu, that like
Yeah.
you could feel something inside you that, wow, that I sense something here. But the one moment that I'll never forget is my father stayed for about 2 years in an Austrian butcher farm. It was forced labor. He was doing work for a butcher. The food they were making was going to German soldiers. They ultimately decided we have to escape from here to join the war effort. We don't want to be helping German soldiers. We want to be fighting German soldiers.
Uh-huh.
My father stayed at a house. It was owned by a gentleman named Otto Schuster. He had a little daughter named Anna. She was much younger than my father. A cute little girl, as it turned out. And he said, "Yeah, I remember there was a little girl named Anna, in the house." He kind of described the house. And when I went there, I wanted to see if that house was still there.
Right,
He,
right.
he remembered the address. It was in a little village in Austria, not kind of a scenic village, not too far from Vienna, close to the Danube River.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me to escape. They got up midnight, left, and that was an adventure, how they escaped and for months made their way back to Poland. So I go to this house, I knock on the house, and the gentleman says, "Oh, there's an old lady living there. You better be careful, though. She's very eccentric." So I'm knocking, thinking, is somebody going to answer? I was ready to leave when a woman opened the door, and it was a caretaker. She didn't understand English, but I said the name Anna Schuster. Does Anna Schuster live here? She
Uh-huh.
said, "Just a minute." She came back a few minutes later. She said, "Come in." Looked a little bit leery of me,
Right.
guided me to a bedroom, and there was a bedridden woman, doing a crossword puzzle, laying in the bed, and I'm trying to describe who I was. Finally, I said the name Marion Bajda.
Oh,
Goes,
give you
"Marion,
chills.
Marion."
Oh.
She was probably when he left. She was probably like maybe 10.
Uh-huh.
I have a feeling she may have had a crush on my father,
I'm certain.
who was probably about 18.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden, the family wakes up, and that damn Polish soldier has escaped.
Uh-huh.
That's the last she knew until that was in the 40s. Until 80 years later,
Yes.
a knock on the door, and his son comes. She spoke for an hour. I had no clue what she was saying because it
Yes.
was German, but she got out a box of photos and she showed me photos, her wedding, everything. And
Oh.
it was that was really special. And I finally left the house and because I wanted to walk my father's steps on his escape route and where he crossed the river and everything that
Uh-huh.
went with that.
Uh-huh.
But and it was a really hot day, that moment will always remain with me.
Oh, oh my gosh. And to know that in your generation, you are retracing those steps. Now, are your children interested in retracing grandpa's steps the same way that you are? Or is that a plan that you all have to do as a family for you, sharing this story firsthand with your children?
Well, they've certainly all read my book. They're very proud of their grandpa. I think they certainly see their grandpa and their grandma in even a different light
Uh-huh.
now
Uh-huh.
than they did before. And one daughter especially, she's just always there for him. So it certainly cemented their, I think, love and respect for him. Obviously, you love your grandparents, but I think as a result of this, they've been to the book talks. And by the way, he would often go to the book talks with me. It definitely cemented that special, feeling that they have for their grandparents.
Nice. What would you say to someone who perhaps through hearing your story of your connection with your father's story, and they're thinking, you know what, even if not for the purpose of a book, that
Yeah,
I want to sit with my parents and get
yeah.
a better understanding of who they are, what advice would you give them as far as making that happen?
Don't procrastinate.
Mm,
Do it now. Make plans and make plans to spend just the two of you, active listening, engagement, not just casual. Make it, do whatever it takes to spend that time together. I'm so blessed, Lorenza. I literally, even though I always wanted to write the story, life happens and I thought I blew it. I just never got around to doing it until finally, once I started, I couldn't stop. So don't procrastinate, just do it now. And even if it feels like there's nothing, even if it feels like what they have to share is very minor, learn,
yeah,
ask, dig, because the more that comes out, the more fascinating it is. And there's going to come a time where we don't have that. You don't
yeah,
have that person.
yeah,
I'm truly blessed. And so many people have come to me and said, wow, I wish that I would have spent that time. I wish I would have done it. But, too often, especially my age, they didn't do that.
yeah,
If they're young enough, I encourage you, just do it.
yeah,
Don't make no excuses. Spend the time and listen. Don't talk, listen.
yeah. Could you in a million years have believed that the onion that was peeled back with all those hours of listening and sharing would equate to the stories that you were told?
Never. One thing I love about journeys is you never know how it's going to go. You never know how it's going to end. And
Hmm.
that's a good thing.
Hmm.
So don't have a expectation of anything. Just let it go. But no, I would have, even though I knew it was an amazing story, an intriguing story, I would have never guessed that it turned out the way it did. And I would have never guessed that it would have taken me, and I would have met the president of Poland. I would have befriended Poland's Secretary of State, who is the very famous general's daughter that I grew up hearing about, who now calls me and says, "How's Dad?" Because she
Listen,
looks at my father as Dad. Um,
can we just pause there and share the story of your father giving her the very
uh,
compass that
yes.
he used to escape, not just once, but multiple times. Like, walk us through that story because I literally got goosebumps
Yeah.
hearing you talk about that.
Yeah, so my father was in a Romanian prison camp. He was wrongly accused of being a spy for Hungary, which is, it's a whole nother story. At the time, Hungary and Romania were fighting. Hungary was actually fighting with the Germans. He was accused of being a spy, sent to a prison camp. He and his buddy were two of 150 prisoners. They only Poles. The rest of them were soldiers, were Hungarian soldiers, a few German soldiers. And my father had came up with a very clever way of escaping. And part of the escape was he befriended the guard, the Romanian guard, who was sounds like a kind of a big oafish fellow,
Uh-huh.
but my father talked him into giving him a compass because they took stuff from my father. So they said, he wanted that compass. Well, he used that compass to guide their escape. It's kind of a long story, but obviously without the compass, they couldn't have made it where they did. And my father had, and he showed it to me. It was a beautiful compass in a leather case, just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when we went to Poland at the invitation, and Anna Maria Anders, the Secretary of State, she was our friend at this point. She had her secretary, her chauffeur pick us up, drive us to a fancy restaurant. Everything's all set up. And my father he was so nervous. He was like a little schoolboy because he
Uh-huh.
had this compass as a gift to give to her.
Uh-huh.
So we meet in this fancy restaurant, wine, soft music, and my father's fumbling like a. She says, "Is your father okay?" I said, "Yeah, he's just excited." He gave her. He said, "I have something for you." It was wrapped up. She opens the compass, and she didn't know. Like, that's nice, but what is this?
Uh-huh.
I said, "We got to read it. There's a note with it," and the note said, "This compass guided me on the journey to join your father's army." And General Anders is a very famous general.
Yeah.
Anybody historian would know that General Anders, they're actually making a movie of him right
Yes, I
now.
saw that. I saw that.
Okay. He said, so this compass guided me in my journey to join your father's army. Now I give it to you as a gift for your journey in life.
Wow.
And she got the compass and literally just started crying. It just meant so much to her, to have this. And when we saw her giving a speech, days about a week later in Monte Cassino in Italy, and there were literally cameras from, it was televised and live in Poland and in Italy. It was a very big event. She gave a beautiful speech. She had a beautiful white dress. She was one of a handful of speakers, including the president. She was the only person who spoke in three languages, and she talked about what this meant. And she was holding the compass. She had the compass with
Wow.
her.
Wow. Now, part of your father's journey with looking to escape was to reunite with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
What was that part of your father's journey like? And what has he said to you as far as the emotions that he experienced?
So my father had a brother named Stephen, and the family, 12 of them, all on a horse-drawn carriage to escape the German invasion. And that's when the adventure begins. They separated. Stefan left the family to try to join the army because he said, I have to join the fights. My father was only 15, Stefan was 17. He wanted to join the fight. Now, nobody knew what happened to Stefan, but later on, they learned Stefan was sent to Siberia. He was accused of being a spy. He was tortured into signing off as being a spy. But my father always had a feeling throughout throughout the 5 years, his own journey, which was taking him all across Europe. He always had a feeling that he was going to reunite with Stefan. He just felt it. He was in Italy, and the Italian campaign. Many Poles died in Italy, and he was now a Polish soldier in Italy. And every time they came to a cemetery of Polish soldiers, he would walk up and down looking to see if he would see the name of his brother because he sensed that Stefan was near. He sensed he was close. And he would look and leave that cemetery. Well, at least he wasn't buried here. But he was sure he was going to see him.
Right.
And it was finally at a train station. He was sent to officer school. He was waiting alone at a train station. There was a 2 hour delay, and he heard a noise, group of soldiers, and he recognized his brother. He recognized the voice of his brother, Stefan. Stefan had left Siberia. This is all a long story.
Uh-huh.
He was part of the Italian campaign. He fought at Monte Cassino. He was fighting under General Anders. So Stefan was part of all this campaign. And my father is now like 20. Stefan's 22, but they last saw each other at 15 and 17. And he walks up, and Stefan just stared at him like he was looking at a ghost. And he said, "Hi, Stefan." That's all he said. I said, what did you say? I said, hi, Stefan. And Stefan was speechless. He didn't know right away because my father, you change a lot from
Yes.
15 to 20.
Uh-huh.
The war happened, everything. And finally, he realized it was his brother. And they spent the next 6 months together in Italy, going through officer school together. The officers actually allowed them to bunk together.
Uh-huh.
And the time they spent, I could tell, was just glorious. Unfortunately, Stephen, because he married an Italian woman, he didn't go to England like most of the Polish soldiers did. They couldn't go back to Poland. He ended up in Argentina. They never did see one another again. Stephen died fairly young,
Uh-huh.
and they had no children. I think the war, the being in Siberia, took a lot of toll on him. So they never did see each other again, which is very unfortunate. And Stephen's story is amazing. My father got enough information that I could include Stefan's story in my book, and how they met. But that's another one of those things of the odds of them meeting were so small,
That
but they
delay
did.
was all it took. And you know, today when people are delayed or traffic or situations happen and we're conditioned now to become frustrated
Mm.
or
Yeah,
angry or blaming, and we miss those God nudges, those
yeah,
opportunities where
yeah,
something greater than us is aligning us for
yeah.
something greater than us.
There was a reason for that delay.
2 hours, and
Yeah.
he's connected with his brother, and he has 6 months. They have 6 months to
Hmm.
be together. Now, did Stephen believe your father to had died, or what was his belief that had happened to your
Yeah.
dad during that time?
I don't know. He probably, I'm sure he wondered what happened to his whole family. Now, the family did get news. They did get a message from Russia that Stefan was alive. That's all they knew.
Hmm.
They didn't know anything else, but all of a sudden you get a message that, he's alive. So they knew he was alive. But unfortunately, it was so hard to communicate, then. And even when he and his brother reunited, they couldn't contact the family back home
Oh,
because the family back at home in Poland was under Russian occupation. They're worried that if they sent word to them that it would
yep,
be intercepted, the
yep,
family could be in trouble because your
yep,
your sons are,
yep.
gonna, we're like their enemy. But so I don't know. I don't know. I didn't. That's a good question. I should ask. I'll ask my father if Stefan ever did share with him what his
Thoughts
what
were.
his thoughts were, because I don't know. I didn't ask that.
What is it that you hope the reader takes away from the book as well as the future movie that you and I spoke off camera? I believe that Ron Howard, if you're listening, I'm going to definitely tag you on this, my friend.
Yeah, boy, that's
Um,
the guy.
yes.
There's
What is the takeaway?
a few other people have approached me, but no, I want to go Ron Howard. Well, first, the takeaway is several things. One is just history, knowing history.
Yeah.
We that war was a world war that we hope would never happen again. And now there are things that are kind of lining up that potentially it could happen again.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't forget why it happened,
Yeah.
what it caused. We shouldn't forget the reasons for it and what we've done to try to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So, number one, just from a historical perspective, we need to understand, what war is and why these wars happen and how nationalism is so dangerous. We need to understand that. But also, it's also not only historical, but it's about people. It's how you yourself, by just keep moving, don't give up, always striving to get reach that goal. In fact, the compass, in my movie,
Yeah.
the script is part of the compass point. We don't know, what's going to happen, but that compass is going to point us in that direction. So follow that compass and enjoy the journey. And when and keep striving, to reach, our destination, which is in a large part, freedom and love and helping others and embracing others, doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, there was a lot of steps, where you fell along the way, in the end, by doing the right thing, the right things happen.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to think it's a story that inspires you. It certainly helped me, in my own journey in life. It's, my wife's in the other room. I'm not, that's another story. We wouldn't be
Listen,
together
I
now.
know. And I'm looking at the time and I'm going, oh my gosh, there's so much more to this story, to your love story and your beautiful wife and all that life has brought you. Where are the listeners able to engage with you and follow you and connect with you to hear more about your stories?
How they can?
Mm-hmm.
You're asking? So yeah, I do have a website. It's my name, first initial and last name, abida.com. I probably need to do a better job of keeping it updated. But I do have, that where, and I also, included in my website is a blog.
Yes.
So my travels, in my travels, I had a blog so the people could kind of follow my own adventure. And when I had that blog, man, people loved that blog. I was getting comments from everywhere, people kind of following my journey in through that blog. And I love to do talks, book talks. I was doing a lot before COVID. I'm starting to get called in to do more now, so I would
Uh-huh.
like to do more of those. So, I'm always available to do book talks. Also, I have a Facebook page, just
Okay.
with my name. If you just Google my name, and I think I'm pretty visible. But yeah, I'd love to get more involved. I also have an idea for another book, that maybe we could talk about at another
Yeah.
time. But and a lot of it's a similar message, about stories that that help others. But yeah, I'd love to reach out, love to share my story and my father's story, and the movie. Obviously, that if that can get on track, that'll become
Yes.
my passion. That would
Wonderful.
absolutely become a passion.
Wonderful. Now we've come to the part of our show that I have renamed One for the Road. It used to be this or that, but that just sounded so boring. So it's now One for the Road in keeping with my
Yeah.
Cheers concept. So I'm going to give you two options and you choose between the two. And
Okay.
let me get my little list for you because I tried to get slightly creative and I hope I didn't create myself out. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're gonna just wing it because I am looking here. And plane ride or boat ride?
Hmm. Boat ride.
Boat. Okay, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee. Movies or books?
Books. That's a tough one. I think books.
Okay. Winter adventure or summer vacation?
I would normally say summer vacation, but one of my best trips was a winter adventure.
Oh, and where was that too?
That was in Zakopane in the beautiful mountains of Poland. It was perfect because
Nice.
summers are getting too hot really to enjoy almost, but that winter in Zakopane was amazing.
Writing notes on pen and paper or transcribing through computer?
Hmm. Writing notes on pen and paper.
Yeah. And last one, hanging out in a hammock or, oh, what's another good one? Or fishing.
Hanging out in a hammock with a really good book.
Ooh, great. I thought you were going to say hanging out in a hammock with the fishing rod.
That would have been captured everything, right? Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Andrew, this was phenomenal. I am so excited that I met both you and your wife, and I do look forward to spending time with you guys personally. This was phenomenal, and I'm just excited to say that I know you, and I'm looking forward to us creating a fabulous friendship.
Well, Thank you, Florenza. I really appreciate this. And from the moment I met you, I felt the same. And my wife keeps saying, when are we going to go see her? She just can't wait. So thank
Yes.
you so much. This I really enjoyed it. And it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.